Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the third official Gamblers List video where I rate all the games I streamed over the past year from worst to best. Because of monstrous video length, and to be even more judgmental than before, we cut the thing in two this year. This video only features the good games, while the other one, which should release roughly around the same time, focuses on the bad ones. It is unfair, it is mean, and if you disagree with anything on either of these lists, then, well, you're obviously wrong. Here we go. 29. Raft. This one barely made it on the good list, even though it was severely lacking in content back when I played it. However, even back then it was a charming survival game in the vein of The Forest or Green Hill, but instead of a jungle or a forest, you are out on the ocean on, surprise, a raft, dealing with sharks, hunger and thirst, and of course the undeniable urge to upgrade your floating shelter to epic fortress levels. Good fun. Hope to play it again on the final release. 28. Outlast. Horror games suck, and jump scares suck even more. But apart from that, it's a pretty solid game, even though the story seems a little gamey. As long as you don't think too hard about it, it has a solid atmosphere, disturbing yet fascinating imagery, and very little to actually complain about. It's good. Not Soma, but good. 27. Frostpunk. I was really excited about it on release, and it didn't exactly let me down. The only reason it's not higher on the list is because after beating it once, I felt no need to ever play it again, even when new content was released. Cool idea, decently implemented, would have loved to see the overworld map used more and the city planning aspect used less. 26. Bad North. Super cool game. Sadly too simple. Not much else to say. Give me more units and more resources and upgrade paths and more enemies and research and yada yada, you know what I like. It was still pretty fun, and I didn't mind restarting over and over. Given that it works with so little, it did a whole lot. But only 3 different unit kinds is a little slim, you know? 25. Warhammer 40k Mechanicus. I really wanted to like this one, but it's just too easy. Apart from that, it has so much going for it. It looks cool, it's pretty unique when it comes down to mechanics. The Necron Awakening gauge was a sweet idea. I really enjoyed the loadout and the skill tree, which is nothing I usually praise all that much in games, and I had a good time with it. However, I kept waiting for the game to finally get hard, and after killing the second major boss I just stopped playing. Maybe such a huge focus on only 3 tech priests makes it problematic to actually lose them? I wouldn't be surprised. But if you go permadeath, you better kill me, and make me like it. 24. Northgard. Such a weird one. It feels like it wants to be an RTS, but at the same time it wants to be a building sim. And that's okay, I guess? I mean, I don't know. I just can't get my head around the idea of playing an RTS while at the same time not being allowed to rush or even scout my opponent in the first 5 minutes of the game. And the way units move between zones and don't attack enemies right next to them if they are not in the same one, kiting wild animals and monsters by dancing back and forth over that zone border. I don't know, I don't like it. But I like pretty much everything else about it, so yeah. 23. 7 Billion Humans. Made by the same incredible people that brought us World of Goo, Little Inferno and Human Resource Machine, this one is pretty much the same as Human Resource Machine. Just harder. I feel like I should criticize it somewhat for reusing so much from the first game that it feels more like a DLC than a standalone game, but I can't overlook that. I think the real issue I have with 7 Billion Humans is that it's too hard for me. How dare you, game? I've been sitting here for over an hour now and I feel like I've not moved towards a solution but further away from it. What? I have a headache. I want to win. I want to move on to the next puzzle, but at the same time I'm afraid of it. In all seriousness, I mean it, the game is too hard for me. Not saying it's not allowed to be, but I liked it less because of that. 22. Death's Gambit. When I started playing Death's Gambit, I stopped within minutes. I couldn't change the language to English, and therefore I made a stand, dug my heels in, and uninstalled again. At least that much I need to be able to expect from a game in 2018, no? I mean, come on. After some off-stream troubleshooting, however, and after changing my entire system's language to English, I tried the game. It's pretty sweet. I didn't really get too invested in the story, but I could say the same about Dark Souls. But if you have any love for games like Salt and Sanctuary, which is probably as close of a comparison as you can find, then you will like Death's Gambit, probably. You might even like it better. And while it isn't exactly reinventing the wheel for the most part, there were some quite outstanding sections in there. The most memorable probably being the insanely cool boss fight against Telemus. 21. Kingdoms 2 Crowns. I've always been a fan of Kingdom ever since I played it for the first time. Skeptics might look at the game and call it a riding simulator, or assume based on gameplay trailers that you don't do much in the game, but yeah, they don't know what they're talking about. If you play the game blind, it does an incredible job at teaching you its rules by not teaching you its rules. Other games have tried that too, and were criticized by me for being bullshit wannabe mysteries, like Below with its complete lack of any and all explanatory tooltips. But the difference here is that every death in Kingdom leaves you smarter, but more importantly eager to try again and do better. Oh, so when I don't build walls early, greed monsters show up and steal my stuff. Oh, so when I ride out into the forest at night, they can catch me out there exhausted and take my crown without much I can do about it. Oh, so when I attack a portal, I have to deal with a retaliation strike afterwards. When somebody like me plays the game after already knowing everything, it's not the same, and you don't see the mistakes that I avoid making, and therefore the game is probably not that well suited for streaming. But I was just too excited for 2 Crowns to release, which is the 3rd game in the franchise if you count New Lands. And yeah, I'll buy the next one too, and probably the one afterwards. The reason it's not higher on the list, however, is because it suffers a little from bad pacing. Sure, you can get a better mount to increase riding speed, but you are still so slow and so blind. It's basically a band-aid for a gunshot wound. In my humble opinion, the game remains niche partly because it hasn't come up with a better solution for many of its problems. And that's okay. I love it anyway. 20. Deep Rock Galactic. I don't play many co-op games. I don't like other people, or even worse, having to rely on them when I game. I like high difficulty, and I like starting over, and I like to destroy my opponents in 1v1 situations, not tag along and work together and deal with someone else's crappy internet. Sharing my food? What? I want to ration that for weeks. No thank you. Maybe that's why Deep Rock Galactic is so impressive to me. Because think of For the King, or Don't Starve Together, or League of Legends. I don't like those games because I don't like losing because of my allies, even when it might not really be their fault. But it still often feels like it is. And that's just not enjoyable for me. Which is to say, it's not that I don't like them, I just don't like playing them in co-op. Deep Rock Galactic, on the other hand, has me excited when one of the other players screws up, because it invites epic rescue missions, tough holdouts, and fights against the odds to still survive and make it back with them. In this game, the mission is epic and fun no matter if you win alone, or together, or not at all. And I deeply respect that. 19. Thea the Awakening. Can we skip this one? I don't want to talk about this one. Generic dragon. Okay, I see. Well, at the end of the day, looking at it was interesting, but we will retreat.
Unleashes its fury and devours your whole party.
Excuse me? What did you just say? '18. Spelunky. Spelunky is one of 2 games on this list that have somewhat of a weird rating, because I feel that I personally rate them unfairly, and try to compensate somewhat for it. The thing is, I can absolutely see why Spelunky is so good, I just didn't like playing it as much. Now, usually I just rate games based on my personal enjoyment and nothing else, but see, I don't really get why it wasn't for me. I see the elegance in its design, it should be a genre I enjoy as well, and I wouldn't argue with anyone that it is a milestone in game design and a classic. But at the same time, that whip has like no range. Being hit by a rock on the head that you threw yourself, that shouldn't deal that much damage. That shopkeeper is just mean. And I am too slow. It is a tiring game, a mean one. I don't know, I'll put it here on spot 18 and leave it there. Okay. 17. Into the Breach. If this game wasn't made by the makers of FTL, everybody would love it. It's really good, it looks gorgeous, it plays well, and it's cool and interesting and everything, but hell, FTL is just towering over it like an older brother that everybody has to compare it to all the time. At least that's what it feels like. If I really wanted to, I could probably start criticizing the game for a lack of replayability, or not enough, or too much content. I feel like it's mostly personal preference at that point, and I personally prefer to leave the poor game alone. It has suffered enough. 16. Oxygen Not Included. This game is like Craft the World, but better and way harder and way more complicated and actually too complicated and way too complicated. And my god, I have a headache again, and I don't think I have ever lost in this game, but have I ever not lost in this game? Look at that spaghetti piping. I cannot stand this anymore. Let's restart. As if that would solve anything. In all seriousness though, I think the Craft the World comparison is pretty accurate. And I do feel like Oxygen Not Included is kind of overdoing it at this point, because honestly I cannot be bothered to try and learn all the things I haven't learned yet anymore. I just want to watch my dudes dig and build, you know? I like doing that. 15. Legion Tower Defense 2. Some people will probably be surprised over how high up in the list this is, but yeah, it's fun. I like to play it. I only streamed it for maybe 3 days, but I have 382 hours in the game. And they are still releasing new factions for it. I wouldn't exactly mind if they would change a thing or two, and it obviously gets minus points for forcing me to have an ally. But overall, I will probably never stream it again, and I want to use this opportunity to at least award it a little bit more street cred, and say that personally I enjoy where they've taken this. 14. Dead in Vinland. This game is so riddled with problems that I don't even know where to begin. Combat is repetitive. The game is unnecessarily long, unnecessarily punishing, not random enough, not nice enough to remember the outcomes of choices I've already made in the past, and it loses a good deal of momentum before you actually get even close to beating it. But I've had such a good time with it. You don't really care for the repetitive fights, you still want as many of them as possible. You don't mind how punishing it is because you're already excited to see what characters you get in the next run. And you don't complain about it not being random enough because you are grateful that you get the same event again. Because this time you already know how to respond, so you get a +2 stat increase on Bloodowit's cooking ability or whatever. I think you see where this is going. I really liked how character stats were treated, and trying to get the most out of the limited time and resources you have is an incredibly addictive core game loop that I want to see in more games in the future. Well played, game. Maybe don't kick me down the stairs next time and end my run after over a week of playing. Maybe work on a couple of other things too. But well played. 13. Rogue Legacy. While I didn't exactly enjoy streaming this game, that was mostly because I was lonely. Probably because I was a few years late to the party. Doesn't change, however, that Rogue Legacy is not only a great game, it's basically the founding father of one of my favorite game genres. Call it roguelike, call it roguelite. At the end of the day, we all know what we mean. If you enjoy roguelites and you've never given this one a go ahead, educate yourself. Learn about where we came from, and dream of where we will go. Meta proves. 12. Don't Starve. I am a Clay fanboy, and nobody can take that away from me. Don't Starve is a wacky survival game with endless replayability, a shit combat system, and it deserves all the love in the world. Enough said. 11. Prismata. If you are the kind of guy who likes to complain about RNG in your strategy games, play this one. About as much RNG as a game of chess, but with different pieces every game. Both sides have access to the same pool of units, and therefore no matter what units you roll, your opponent has the same. And from there on out you can theoretically math the shit out of everything. I'm personally super happy that we have games like this one, and while I'm not exactly thrilled about how damage is calculated in Prismata, it's a minor gripe in comparison to how awesome the overall package is. What I am talking about is that Prismata plays a little bit like a nuclear war. For my personal taste, it lacks a bit of the usual back and forth that RTS games often have. In StarCraft, for example, or take Supreme Commander, doesn't really matter, both sides build an army, the armies fight, both sides take losses. In Prismata, on the other hand, I often found that both sides build up and no one attacks, and they build up and build up and build up, until one side can't keep up anymore and collapses almost completely in one turn without having dealt much damage to the opponent in the end. It's not unfair, the winner's tools were all available to the loser just the same, but given how damage is inflicted by the attacker first, it's more about finding a lethal opening than actually trading blows. 10. Celeste. This game is awesome and flawless, and you should play it, and it might look super frustrating, but it really isn't. Sure, you die a lot, but given how you lose about 3 seconds of progress, you can try the same ridiculously hard chain of jumps over and over again without even realizing. I died 1,000 times in this game and I beat it in one day. That is not an over-exaggeration. In fact, I had such a good time that I was surprised to realize that at some point my hands started hurting because they had been tense and working hard for hours. Don't get scared now, you will survive. It will be great. 9. Warhammer 40k Gladius. What, Matt? Seriously? Yes! Remember that game that I wouldn't shut up about for months? I stopped streaming it pretty quickly because no one seemed all too interested and I don't like to stream for myself. But by now I have almost 400 hours in the game and I'm looking forward to when the new DLC comes out, Tyranids as a playable faction. Now, the game has been criticized for not having diplomacy or religion or all that other boring crap, and for not being a true 4X game, and frankly, I don't care for all of that. Of course it's not a 4X game, it's a turn-based RTS. At least that's what I view it as. And of course, RTS stands for real-time strategy, and therefore it cannot be turn-based, yada yada, but you get my point, don't you? You would never ask for diplomacy or religion in StarCraft. You would ask for it to be slowed down maybe, so you can keep up with what's happening, but that's about it. I also read about the game being criticized for its AI being weak, and I guess that's why the devs have been working so hard on improving it. But I can't really comment on that because I played 1 or 2 single-player games, and from there on out, I was just pure PvP, baby. Sure, player base is small, but the Discord server has a good amount of people who are always looking for games. Then you can always fight me, if you dare. You wimp. I will crush you. Have we taken this joke far enough by now? 8. Hades. Hades, made by the guys that made Bastion and Transistor, is one of the best roguelites that isn't out yet. Think Dead Cells back when there were only 2 bosses implemented. It's different perspective-wise, and it doesn't have its strengths exactly where Dead Cells has them, but it would be safe to say that there's a fair bit of overlapping there. If I had to name Hades' biggest strength that Dead Cells doesn't have, I'd have to point to the NPCs, I think. Which is not something I usually point to, but Hades is filled with lovable and cool characters that have so many different voice lines that it's not even real anymore. The biggest downside of the game, to many of you, is probably that it is an Epic Games Store exclusive, so you cannot pick it up via Steam and listen. I get that. I also would prefer to have all my games in one list instead of in 3 or 7 if we count consoles. But I'm rating the game here, not the store. And if I was to rate the store, it's not that bad as far as I can tell. I thoroughly enjoyed Hades, however, and will be sure to return when there is more content. 7. StarCraft 2. What? You streamed that? Yes, I streamed that. Didn't see that, huh? I only picked it up for a few days, and while it was interesting, I didn't like streaming it. I'm well aware of how bad I am compared to, esports, and even people that are just playing StarCraft 2 passionately. I'm too slow, like 99% of this planet's population, hopefully. And that's probably the only criticism I have for the game. It's based on speed as much as strategy, which is great for watching, but yeah, it's this high up in the list, partly because of how much I like watching it, and how much I liked playing it back when I was actually playing it. Diamond League, Wings of Liberty, represent! But yeah, I'm old now, and weak, and I probably won't play it again. Much love though. 6. Green Hill. You probably at some point or another heard me going on and on about the 3 survival games that I consider the 3 big ones. Subnautica, The Long Dark, and The Forest. Well, now there are 4. Green Hill rocks, and I will play more of it every now and then, at least. And constantly reference it, and gush about it, and think about it, and keep a close eye on its development. Even worse than that, however, is that now that Green Hell has appeared, I hope there will be even more. I hope that this is about to become basically its own subgenre, as different as those 4 games might be. I'm talking about freeform sandbox-style survivals, I think. That just, the ones that just throw you into the world and let you figure out how to survive. And build stuff, maybe, or scavenge, or explore, or whatever the next one's focus will be. Something like Rust, or Ark, or 7 Days to Die just doesn't do it for me. Those feel different. I'd maybe call them multiplayer survivals in comparison. The finished story mode of Subnautica, or the unfinished one of The Long Dark, feel different. Interesting too, but definitely not the same kind of adventure that I had when it came to digging that tunnel for my submarine in Subnautica, or trying to survive as long as possible in The Long Dark. It's a somewhat different form of replayability. You still go for a run, and you talk about this one being a good run, and the last run being cut short by an asshole wolf. But it's not the same as XCOM or Enter the Gungeon, where you have a clear-cut and defined goal. More of a let's see what could happen sort of thing. and Green Hell scratches exactly that itch. 5. Nier Automata. I would have never played this game in my own time. It felt a little too geeky, a little too much cheap anime, with a protagonist that is well aware of you trying to get a glimpse up her skirt, a little bit too impractical in how the battle uniform just happens to look like a maid uniform at the same time. And what's the point of that blindfold again? I'm not hating here, I'm just saying I wouldn't have picked it up personally. But oh boy am I happy I did. The game is epic and beautiful, and as weird as it is and as long as it is, I'd say it's a modern classic. Sure, lots of button mashy combat too, overly action focused in its animation, somewhat boring air combat segments. But hey, some people like that, right? What I enjoyed so much about Nier Automata, on the other hand, is how original a lot of it felt without going completely off the rails and abandoning all common conventions. For example, the way the game plays with perspective all the time. The way the story really starts to kick in only after the first playthrough. That epic double boss fight towards the end that would jump between two battles fought at the same time. Maybe other games did that before, I don't know. I saw it first here, and I won't easily forget. 4. Dead Cells. While Nier is full of beauty but lacks a little in the gameplay department, Dead Cells is just a solid, good game, and I'd like to think that I value that higher. Heaps of replayability, smooth and responsive controls, sounds great, looks great, several possible paths to choose from, really solid stuff. As a side note, it probably has the most fun Twitch integration for big channels I've ever seen so far. That bird can be hilarious. Now, before we reveal the top 3, here are some honorable mentions. The Forest. As a huge fan of the core concept and in appreciation of the most satisfying tree cutting mechanic ever, I was rather disappointed to see that the final release of The Forest didn't add half as much as I had hoped for. In fact, me and a few viewers teamed up on stream and explored the map for a good hour or so, without finding much to show for it. The game is now beatable. It is supposed to be finished and fleshed out, and it feels as incomplete as it did 2 years ago. Because of this, I feel pretty conflicted when it comes to rating it, so I decided to mention one last time how much potential this game had in my opinion. But sadly I can only recommend it as a case study of an unfinished game. Phoenix Point. It is still very much unfinished, and in its current state they have a long way to go, but every new step along the way has me a little more excited than the last one. I can only wish the team a lot of success, and especially endurance, and I'm very much looking forward to tagging along and seeing it grow. For the King. One of those games I don't play enough. I've never even managed to beat the base game, and by now there are, I believe, 2 more content packs or maps, or not sure what they are. I'll find the time someday. Darkest Dungeon. The Color of Madness DLC seems not as impactful as Crimson Court did, and personally I'm not a big fan of the Endless mode either, but the game is still as enjoyable as it has always been. I'm, however, slowly reaching the point where I am more curious about the next game than about more stuff for this one. Just my 2 cents. Battle Brothers. The new DLC is out, and I don't have enough time to play it. I haven't seen enough late game content yet, I haven't killed enough brothers yet, and one day we will raise that fucking black monolith to the ground and wipe out anything and anyone that tries to stop us. XCOM 2. So, what's this looking like?
We got the gear.
Just a quick, polite nod in the direction of Rexis. You guys are fun, and I like you, and I can't wait for XCOM 3. Other games. Yeah, this video is supposed to entail all the games I streamed this year, but on April 1st we did something special and said we would switch games whenever somebody would follow, or subscribe, or donate. On top of that, there were 3 or 4 other games that I only streamed for a day or so, and I didn't want to assign each one of those their own spot in the ranking. So here you go, special shout out to Minesweeper. 3. Hollow Knight. Just play it. A beautiful masterpiece, incredible soundtrack, content for months, 10 out of fucking 10. If there was anything at all that I would maybe criticize, is that I think that it might almost be too much content, especially with the DLC and whatnot. I mean, personally I felt like I wanted to see the end at some point, and the game just kept going, and I didn't even play with the DLC, and I didn't kill all the bosses either. But then again, I was quitting smoking back then and I was usually kind of annoyed at everything, so who knows. Maybe that was part of the reason why I felt impatient. 2. Slay the Spire. At this point, rating one over the other seems so impactful and is at the same time so very meaningless. You cannot compare a tactical shooter to a rhythm game and claim that one is better than the other, just as you cannot compare a painting with an ice cream flavor or a volleyball. Slay the Spire is an achievement, and easily one of the very best games to come out in 2018, and it captures what I enjoy most about deck building 10 times better than any other card game I know. I believe that replayability is one of the qualities in video games that I personally value most. Hollow Knight or Nier Automata are great in their own right, but I wouldn't want to play them right now. But I can always go for a Spire run. This game is a treasure, and I don't feel the slightest bit guilty to put last year's number 1 spot again in the top 3. It did release this year after all. 1. Subnautica. I am aware that this is another of quite a few games that have made it onto the list more than once by now, and I've been thinking about maybe avoiding that in the future. It kind of feels disappointing perhaps to wait for the big reveal of spot 1 and then it's that game again. I get that. At the same time, show me better games if you can. Subnautica is not only the game I enjoyed most this year, it's probably the game I've enjoyed most in the entire genre ever. It did officially release this year, and I did stream it again. Battle Brothers in comparison only made it into the honorable mentions, and that is probably because it feels less final than Subnautica, less like a farewell. I already know that I will continue to play a good amount of Battle Brothers in 2019 too, and it will therefore probably remain in the honorable mentions next year as well. But for Subnautica, this is it. The game is complete, done, and I don't see myself playing it again. I'll probably show it to friends and watch them play, and enjoy seeing their faces when they encounter Leviathan for the first time, or hear the song of the reefbacks in the distance. I love this game so very much, and I'm grateful that I got to experience it. There will be DLC, of course, but I doubt it will have anywhere near as much impact on me as the original game had. So to me, this feels like a final way to show respect and appreciation for one of my favorite games of all time. This was the Gamblers List 2018. I thank you very much for watching, and feel free to loudly and angrily disagree in the comment section. Curious what you guys think. Keep in mind that this is one of 2 videos, the other one being the Grumblers List 2018 featuring the worst games of the year. I'll leave a link somewhere. Yeah.